One of the biggest ironies in love is that the person who seems to care the least often ends up hurting the most, just not right away. The avoidant, the one who always keeps their walls high, who stays cool and distant, who says they just need space, doesn't realize the cost of that distance until it's too late, when they finally lose someone genuine, in someone patient, kind, emotionally safe. They don't just lose a relationship, they lose their mirror, the one person who made love feel possible despite their fear of it. Avoidants often live with an invisible armor. It protects them from rejection, but it also stops them from ever truly connecting. They tell themselves they're fine on their own, that they don't need anyone. And for a while, that story works. They distract themselves, they rationalize, they pretend they're in control. But eventually, when the quiet sets in and there's no one left to blame or run from, they're forced to face what they've been avoiding all along, their own emptiness. You see, when you lose someone genuine, you don't just lose love. You lose the chance to be seen without your armor. And for avoidance, that's devastating, because it's the first time they realize how rare that kind of love actually was. It's not that they don't care, it's that they cared too much and didn't know how to handle it. Deep down, they wanted to be loved, but they were terrified of needing it. So they pushed away the very person who made them feel safe. And when that person finally leaves, the avoidance starts to unravel, not because of the loss itself, but because of the truth it exposes. Their defenses didn't protect them, they cost them everything real. This collapse doesn't happen dramatically, it's quiet. It's the 2 a.m. thoughts, it's the song they suddenly can't listen to. It's realizing that no one else laughs the same way or listens with that kind of warmth. Slowly, their heart begins to ache for what they thought they didn't need. Avoidants often think love is about control, how much they give, how much they receive, how much they feel. But genuine love doesn't work that way. It demands vulnerability. It requires you to show up, not hide. And once an avoidant loses someone genuine, they learn the hardest lesson of all. Love can't survive behind walls. If you've been that genuine person who loved an avoidant, don't take their distance as proof that you didn't matter. Often you were the first person who did, and if you're the avoidant, understand this. Your collapse isn't your punishment, it's your wake-up call. The pain you feel is not your failure. It's your heart finally asking for what it's been denied all along, connection. Because no matter how strong your walls are, love has a way of finding the cracks. And if you're brave enough to face your pain instead of running from it, those cracks won't destroy you. They'll let the light in. Avoidants often build their emotional world around one powerful illusion: control. They believe that if they can manage how much they feel, how much they give, and how much they let others in, they can protect themselves from getting hurt to them. Love feels unpredictable, messy, and dangerously dependent on another person's choices. So, they construct emotional walls, thick, silent barriers between themselves and vulnerability. On the surface, this gives them a sense of safety. They appear calm, detached, and self-sufficient. But underneath that composed exterior is a heart that's deeply afraid of chaos, rejection, and loss of autonomy. What they call control is really fear in disguise. For an avoidant, the idea of needing someone feels threatening. They see dependence as weakness, not realizing that healthy relationships are built on mutual trust, not control. They crave closeness but resist it at the same time. It's like being thirsty but refusing to drink because they're afraid of drowning. They'll engage in relationships but keep one foot out the door, maintaining enough distance to feel in charge. They tell themselves that this distance prevents heartbreak, but what it actually does is slowly starve the relationship of warmth and intimacy. This illusion of control begins to crumble when they meet someone genuine, in someone who offers love without games, consistency without pressure, and presence without judgment. At first, it feels uncomfortable, even suffocating. The avoidant may start to withdraw, finding excuses to pull back because true intimacy triggers old fears. They might confuse peace for boredom or mistake emotional safety for lack of passion. The reason is simple: they have mistaken emotional turbulence for connection all their lives. So, when love feels stable, it feels foreign. But when that genuine person eventually gives up, when they stop trying to climb those walls, the avoidance illusion shatters. Suddenly, the very control that once made them feel powerful becomes the reason for their emptiness. They realize that their emotional self-defense didn't prevent pain, it delayed it. They were so focused on managing loss that they forgot to experience love. And when they finally lose someone authentic, it hits them that the walls they built weren't protecting them. They were isolating them. In the silence that follows, the avoidant begins to see the real cost of their control. They notice the absence of laughter that once filled their days, the warmth that used to calm their restless mind, and the sense of belonging they quietly took for granted. This is when they start to understand that love isn't something you manage. It's something you experience fully, even at the risk of pain. The illusion of control collapses under the weight of truth. Connection requires surrender. You cannot hold someone close while keeping your guard up. For avoidance, this realization is often the beginning of transformation. It's painful, humbling, and deeply uncomfortable. But in that discomfort lies the truth they've been avoiding all along. Control may keep you safe, but only vulnerability allows you to be truly loved. When an avoidant loses someone genuine, the loss runs deeper than they initially realize. To outsiders, they might look composed, even indifferent. They move on quickly, stay busy, or distract themselves with work, hobbies, or new connections. But beneath that calm exterior lies a growing void. Avoidants don't just lose a relationship, they lose the rare experience of being truly seen. Someone genuine doesn't love superficially. They notice the small details, offer patience during silence, and see beyond the guarded behavior. When that kind of person walks away, it's not just the absence of companionship that hurts, it's the absence of understanding. Avoidants spend much of their lives feeling unseen or misunderstood, and when someone finally recognizes who they are beneath the armor, it awakens a part of them they didn't even know was starving. At first, the avoidant convinces themselves they are fine. They tell themselves it's better this way, that the relationship was too emotional, too demanding, too complicated. They rely on logic to dull the ache, rehearsing reasons that justify their distance. Yet, as time passes, those rationalizations lose power. They find themselves haunted by memories that refuse to fade. The way that person made them feel safe enough to laugh freely, the calm presence that softened their constant tension, the comfort of knowing someone cared even when they pushed them away. These moments begin to replay in their mind, not as nostalgia, but as realizations of what they let slip away. What makes the loss of a genuine person so impactful is the emotional safety they offered. For avoidants, love often feels like a battlefield where they must constantly guard themselves from rejection. But a genuine partner doesn't fight, they hold space. They offer consistency without control, affection without conditions. That kind of love gently disarms an avoidant's defenses over time. It makes them feel safe enough to relax, perhaps for the first time. So, when that love disappears, it's not just heartbreak, it's withdrawal from emotional oxygen. They don't just miss the person, they miss the version of themselves that only existed in that person's presence. This realization often arrives too late. Avoidants begin to understand that emotional distance, which once felt like strength, is actually the reason for their emptiness. The safety of their solitude now feels hollow because they've tasted what real emotional connection feels like. Losing someone genuine forces them to confront a hard truth. Protection without connection is loneliness disguised as peace. They may have thought they were preserving themselves, but in reality, They were slowly erasing the possibility of being loved deeply. Over time, this loss becomes a mirror. It shows them what their fear has cost them, the warmth of being understood, the depth of shared silence, and the comfort of trust. And while the genuine person may have moved on, the avoidant is left wrestling with the echoes of what could have been. The emotional collapse that follows isn't about the breakup itself. It's about the recognition that in trying so hard not to need anyone, they pushed away the one person who made needing someone feel safe. The emotional collapse of an avoidant doesn't happen with loud cries, public displays of grief, or immediate regret. It unfolds slowly in silence long after everyone believes they've moved on. Avoidants are masters of appearing unaffected. They pride themselves on composure, on being the calm one who doesn't lose control. They tell themselves they're fine, that they did the right thing by protecting their boundaries, that love just wasn't meant to work. For a while, they might even believe it, but beneath that exterior, the quiet begins to grow heavy. It starts with small moments, their mind wandering back to a familiar laugh, a scent that catches them off guard, a memory that sneaks into their thoughts before sleep. These are the subtle beginnings of their emotional reckoning. At first, they dismiss these feelings. They tell themselves it's just habit, nostalgia, or boredom. But as days turn into weeks, something deeper begins to surface. Avoidants often carry emotions like submerged icebergs. What's visible is only a fraction of what lies beneath. Their avoidance doesn't erase feelings, it buries them. When the person they pushed away is gone for good, that emotional weight begins to rise to the surface. The silence that once felt peaceful becomes suffocating. The freedom they thought they wanted starts to feel like isolation. They find themselves replaying conversations in their head, analyzing what they said, what they didn't say, what they should have done differently. Regret begins to whisper where pride once spoke loudly. The collapse doesn't come from the absence of the other person. It comes from the presence of unprocessed emotion. Avoidants have spent much of their lives outrunning vulnerability. But love, once experienced, doesn't leave quietly. It lingers in the nervous system, in the mind, in the heart. When they finally stop running, all the feelings they've avoided crash down at once. There's guilt for pushing someone away, confusion about why they couldn't stay, and grief for realizing that their self-protection cost them something irreplaceable. It's not dramatic, it's slow erosion. They stop enjoying the things that used to distract them. They become restless, irritable, or introspective, unsure why the world suddenly feels heavier. What makes this quiet aftermath so painful is that avoidants are not used to sitting with emotion. They've spent years perfecting the art of detachment, so when real pain comes, they have no tools to manage it. They can't intellectualize it away. They can't run fast enough to escape it. The emotional collapse forces them to face what they've avoided all along. The vulnerability they fear is the same vulnerability that connects them to love, meaning, and life. It's in this stillness that they begin to understand the cost of their distance. They realize that silence doesn't equal peace, that solitude doesn't always mean strength, and that control doesn't protect from heartbreak. The quiet aftermath becomes a mirror, reflecting not just who they lost, but who they became to avoid losing themselves. And in that reflection, for the first time, they begin to see the depth of what they've been missing all along: real emotional connection. Avoidants are often misunderstood as cold, unfeeling, or incapable of love. But beneath their distance lies a very different story. They are not heartless, they are afraid of being hurt, rejected, or abandoned. Every wall they build, every moment they pull away, is an act of self-protection born from past experiences that taught them closeness equals pain. Somewhere in their history, they learned that vulnerability was unsafe. Maybe they grew up in an environment where love was inconsistent or where expressing emotion led to disappointment. So they adapted. They learned to depend on themselves, to keep their emotions private, to stay in control. Over time, that self-protection became their identity. They confuse independence with strength, believing that needing no one is the ultimate form of safety. But in truth, that safety comes at a cost. The avoidance detachment may protect them from pain, but it also starves them of love. They become trapped in their own armor, disconnected not only from others but from themselves. When someone genuinely cares for them, it triggers deep conflict. On one hand, they crave the comfort and connection, on the other, they fear it. Love threatens their carefully maintained equilibrium because it asks for openness, something they've been running from for years. So, they retreat not because they don't feel, but because they feel too much. The intensity of true emotional connection terrifies them. This fear often expresses itself through mixed signals, pulling close, then pushing away, showing warmth one moment and distance the next. It's confusing to the person who loves them, but even more confusing to the avoidant themselves. They want love, but don't know how to stay present in it. Their fear of losing control becomes stronger than their desire for intimacy. They may tell themselves that others are too much, that they just need space, but deep down they are protecting an old wound that's never healed. And as long as that wound remains unacknowledged, they continue repeating the same cycle, longing for closeness but running from it when it appears. The saddest part is that avoidants often don't realize what they're losing until it's gone. They don't see that their detachment, which they believed was strength, is actually a form of quiet self-sabotage. Their relationships fail not because they lack emotion, but because they refuse to show it. They may watch genuine love slip through their fingers, convincing themselves it wasn't right, only to feel the weight of regret when the silence sets in. Inside, they ache with a longing they can't express. What the world sees as indifference is often a shield against deep sensitivity. Avoidants feel deeply. They just feel safest when no one knows. Their hearts are tender, but their fear is louder. It tells them that if they let someone in, they'll be hurt again. Yet, every act of avoidance only reinforces the loneliness they're trying to escape. The truth is that their detachment doesn't protect them. It imprisons them. They end up guarded from the very love that could heal them, trapped behind walls they built for safety, but now stand as barriers between them and the connection their soul quietly craves. The emotional collapse of an avoidant, as painful as it is, often marks the beginning of real healing. For the first time, their carefully constructed walls start to crack, and through those cracks, awareness begins to seep in. It's not an easy process. It's uncomfortable, disorienting, and often comes with guilt or regret. But within that pain lies a rare opportunity, the chance to finally understand themselves and transform the way they relate to love. When an avoidant loses someone genuine, the loss forces them to confront everything they've been avoiding, their fears, their attachment wounds, and the truth about what intimacy really means. What once felt like strength now feels like emptiness, and that contrast becomes impossible to ignore. Healing begins the moment they stop running. It's the moment they sit with the ache instead of numbing it, the moment they admit that their detachment wasn't protection, it was fear. This realization is often the hardest step because it requires vulnerability. For someone who's spent their life trying to stay in control, admitting that fear has been the driver all along feels like defeat. But it's not. It's awakening. It's the start of reclaiming the parts of themselves that were buried under years of avoidance. When they finally allow themselves to feel the grief, the loss, and the longing, they begin to reconnect with the emotional world they shut out. The path to healing isn't linear. Some days they may feel open, hopeful, and ready to love again, while on others they might retreat into their old patterns. But each time they choose honesty over withdrawal, openness over silence, they grow stronger. They start to see that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's courage. It's the act of showing up authentically, even when there's a risk of being hurt. The very thing they once feared becomes the key to their emotional freedom. They learn that true love isn't about control or perfection. It's about connection, empathy, and mutual effort. Eventually, they begin to understand that love doesn't require them to abandon their independence. It invites them to share it. They can still be strong, but that strength can now include softness. They realize that emotional intimacy isn't suffocating, it's liberating. It allows them to be seen fully and accepted anyway. This awareness slowly transforms how they approach relationships. Instead of running from closeness, they learn to lean into it. Instead of fearing rejection, they trust that they can survive it. The collapse that once felt like an ending becomes a doorway to something deeper. It humbles them, softens them, and teaches them compassion for themselves and for others. It shows them that connection requires presence, that love requires risk, and that healing requires truth. And in that truth, they finally find peace, not the hollow peace of avoidance, but the grounded peace of knowing they can love and be loved without losing themselves. In the end, the journey of the avoidant is not one of failure, but of awakening. Losing someone genuine becomes the mirror that reflects what fear has long concealed. The truth that love demands courage, not control. It is through heartbreak that they finally learn to open, to feel, and to understand that vulnerability is not their weakness, but their greatest strength. Every collapse becomes an invitation to rebuild, this time with honesty, softness, and heart. Thank you for listening, for holding space for this message, and for believing that even the most guarded hearts can find their way back to love.